Hello photographers, this video is part 2 in a series looking at iPad Pro raw photo editing apps. The apps we're comparing are Lightroom, Affinity Photo, Pixelmator Photo, Raw Power, Snapseed, and Darkroom. And in this video we're looking at the features these apps offer. If you want to see a comparison of how well these apps edit raw files, check out the first video in the series up in the info card or down in the doobly-doo. In comparing the feature set of these apps, there were a few key things that I wanted to highlight. Those things are asset and file management, the editing tool set, and export options. Let's start with asset and file management. First, we need to separate Lightroom from the rest of these raw editors because Lightroom is the only app that offers a full set of asset management tools for keeping your photos organized. With that said, while none of the other apps offer a native asset management solution like Lightroom does, you can still do asset management on your iPad with some of the other apps. First, let's clear Snapseed and Affinity Photo from the deck because neither one of these offer any kind of asset management for your raw files. With Pixelmator Photo, the default interface you're presented with when you open the app is actually the iOS Files app. And within the Files app, you can do your own asset management using cloud services like iCloud and Dropbox. And when iPad OS is released, you'll even be able to store and organize files directly on the iPad's internal storage. However, with Pixelmator Photo, this isn't really meant to be used for asset management as much as it's meant to be the interface you use to select the raw file you want to edit. Because it's integrating with the iOS file system and using the Files app native interface, you have the ability to move, rename, and manage files just as you do in the Files app. But this breaks down almost immediately upon opening a raw file to edit because once you do, Pixelmator automatically creates a proprietary .photo file in the Pixelmator Photo iCloud folder. Pixelmator Photo then saves all of the edits you make into that .photo file, effectively duplicating your raw file. This takes up at least twice as much space on whatever cloud service or drive space it's being stored on, and in the case of the Sony raw file I was testing, the .photo files I got are 248 megabytes. That's 10 times larger than the original raw files, which is horribly inefficient. So, after editing, you've got this file in the Pixelmator iCloud folder. You could use the Files app interface to move that .photo file into whatever folder your original RAW is in to keep them organized together, or you could keep all of your RAWs organized inside the Pixelmator iCloud folder, and then after editing, organize the .photo file into your system. But no matter how you approach it, after editing in Pixelmator, you're going to have to move some files around if you don't want all of the .photo files mixed together in the root Pixelmator Photo iCloud folder. Now, up until this point, it's just been about using the Files app and interface in Pixelmator Photo, but you can also get raw files into Pixelmator via your camera roll. And from that, it does follow that you can use the native Photos app on your iPad to manage and organize your raw files. This is still subject to the issue of Pixelmator creating that .photo file, but this one isn't saved to the Pixelmator iCloud folder and instead is held in a kind of limbo inside the app. The edited .photo file shows up as a file in the Pixelmator Photo Recents section of the app, and it's listed as being in iCloud, but it doesn't appear anywhere in iCloud when you're browsing in the Files app. If you are using the Photos app as your asset management system, there is a way to deal with this duplication with the export options that Pixelmator offers, and I'll be covering those when we get to the export section of this video. Raw Power and Darkroom both take a different approach to the interface and photo organization by using the camera roll as the default. We'll start with Raw Power, which opens up to an interface showing all of your albums. From there, you can go into any album and select a raw file or another image and edit it. Within that interface, you can create new albums, move photos into different albums, favorite photos, delete photos, and you can batch edit photos. That's right, you can batch edit photos with Raw Power. In fact, as of recording this video, Raw Power and Darkroom are the only two apps that offer batch raw editing on iPad. In Raw Power, the batch tools allow you to apply a preset, including custom presets that you can make, paste the last edit, reset all selected raw files, generate raw previews, and batch export. Another advantage to using the camera roll as the principal interface is that Raw Power doesn't create a copy of the raw file like like Pixelmator Photo does. After editing in RAW Power, you have the choice to embed the changes into the RAW file in the camera roll or to discard the changes after exporting. And before you freak out about embedding those edits directly into the RAW file, you can easily reset the edits individually or, as I just mentioned, in a batch. So with RAW Power, you're essentially committing to using the Photos app to manage and organize your RAWs and any other photos included in your camera roll. And interestingly, RAW Power doesn't offer any kind of direct files access from within the app. Everything there is oriented towards the camera roll interface. However, you can get RAW files from the Files app into RAW Power through the share sheet. You have to enable RAW Power's Send to RAW Power action, and once you do, it appears in the Actions row anytime you bring up the share sheet for RAW or other image files. When you use RAW Power's share action, it imports the RAW file to the camera roll in an album called Sent to RAW Power. You then have to open RAW Power to get to work on the file. And then once in RAW Power, you can of course save the RAW file to any album you choose and open that file to edit it. This process of sending a RAW file from the Files app to RAW Power creates a duplicate with the original RAW in the Files app and the duplicate in the camera roll. So if you're using the Files app to send images to RAW Power, you'll need to consider how you'll manage that duplication. Now, this brings us to Darkroom. Darkroom's approach is a mix of both RAW Power's approach and Pixelmator Photo's approach. The default interface is a camera roll-centric interface with your albums on the left side, including a list of some default categorization. Selecting an album brings the contents of the album to the main screen, but unlike in RAW Power, you can't do any kind of organization in Darkroom. You have access to your entire camera roll, but any actual organization would have to be done in the Photos app. The one exception is that you can favorite photos. However, Darkroom, as I mentioned earlier, also offers batch editing. The batch tools include deleting, favoriting, hiding, pasting edits, resetting edits, and exporting. What it lacks in batch editing that RAW Power has is the ability to batch apply a preset. The workaround for this in Darkroom is to apply a preset to an image, then copy the edits from that image, and then batch paste that edit. Another difference from RAW Power is that when in the camera roll interface, you can directly import RAW files from the Files app to Darkroom for editing. This, in my opinion, is superior to RAW Power's share action because it's easier, requiring less work to get the file into the app for editing, and it avoids the duplication issue created by RAW Power's share sheet action. So with the apps we have available to us at the time of recording, there's basically 3 options for asset management depending on the app you choose and the methodology that works best for you. You can use Lightroom's entirely native system, you can use the Files app to create your own system, or you can use the camera roll. There is, of course, no right asset management answer, as your needs will be unique to you. For me, I prefer the native system Lightroom provides, but if I could not use Lightroom, I would probably use the Files app to create my own system. Now let's take a look at the actual editing tools available, as after asset management, editing is the next logical step in working with your photos. And in this, they're all pretty similar. We're not talking about the quality of the edits made with these tools. We did that comparison in this video right here. Rather, we're looking at the actual raw editing tools that are or are not available. Across the board, all of the basic raw tools are there in every app. We're talking about exposure, contrast, highlight and shadow recovery, vibrant, saturation, cropping, straightening, sharpening, perspective correction, white balance. All of this is the basic stuff and every app has it. There are some interesting exceptions though, so let me highlight those. As I mentioned in the video comparing the editing abilities of these apps, Lightroom is the only app that allows you to choose a RAW profile. RAW Power and Darkroom are the only two that do not offer any kind of spot healing. And I mentioned that they all have a white balance tool, but Affinity Photo and Darkroom both lack a white balance eyedropper for selecting a neutral tone to autocorrect the white balance. Lightroom, Snapseed, and Affinity Photo are the only apps that allow for selective raw edits, with Lightroom and Affinity both offering brush tools and gradient tools, while Snapseed only offers its Smart Node tool. And the last thing I want to highlight specifically is presets. Affinity Photo is the only raw editor that does not offer any kind of built-in raw presets, and both Snapseed and Affinity Photo both lack support for custom raw presets. You can make your own presets in-app with Lightroom, Pixelmator Photo, RAW Power, and Darkroom. But Pixelmator Photo and Lightroom are the only two that support importing presets to the app. However, with Lightroom, you can only import presets if you have a subscription to their cloud sync service, as the presets have to be imported to the desktop version of the app, which then sync over to the iPad version. Pixelmator Photo, on the other hand, lets you easily import and export presets. To export a preset, you just long press it and choose the share option. And to import it, you can have someone airdrop it to you, or you can save it to iCloud, Dropbox, or your cloud service of choice, and that gets it into the Files app. And then just tap the .adjustments file to import the preset. There are some other minor differences as to the tools available, but these are the key differences that I wanted to highlight. And as far as the editing experience goes, every app uses sliders for the raw adjustments, making it very easy to actually do the editing you want to do. Once you've edited a photo, you usually want to export it, and here we find some interesting differences between the apps. But before we get to those differences, this video has been brought to you by me. I put a lot of time and effort into making these videos, and if you'd like to support these videos and my channel, I would be incredibly grateful. You can do that by checking out my merch store, where you can get some cool merch like the Take Some Damn Photos hoodie, or you could join my Patreon at this link right here. Now let's take a look at these export options. Lightroom is frustratingly limited with only 2 export options. The first is to export the original RAW file. That is to copy the RAW file to a new destination without any edits applied. And the second option is to export it as a JPEG with the edits applied. This JPEG export is really annoying. Your only options on exporting the JPEG are to choose full resolution or to size it to 2048 pixels on the long edge. And that's it. There are no other options. You can't change the file type, you can't change the size options, you can't even set the JPEG compression level. The hands down best app for exporting photos is Affinity. With Affinity, when you open the app, you're presented with the project workspace, which shows you all of your open projects. And if you want to edit a RAW file, you import it from the camera roll or the Files app. Upon import, you're immediately launched into the RAW editing workspace, and once you're done editing a RAW file, you have 2 choices. You can either commit your changes or discard them. Upon committing your changes, Affinity creates a new .af photo file and puts you into the photo persona, which is Affinity's core functionality as an app. Affinity is like Photoshop, and so you have all of the same raster editing tools that Photoshop offers, but that's not the topic of this video, so we're actually going to set that aside. What I want to discuss is the .af photo file. With Affinity, your RAW edits are never saved in conjunction with your RAW file. There's no option to write the edits to the RAW file like some of the other apps, and there's no database keeping a record of those changes like Lightroom does. The idea, as I mentioned, is that Affinity is similar to Photoshop. The thought is that after you've made your RAW edits, you are going to move right into making your raster edits, which need to be saved into a file. If it were Photoshop, you'd save it as a Photoshop or a TIFF file. In Affinity, you save it as a .af photo file. And if you exit out of Affinity's editing mode, you're put into the project workspace. And if you tap the hamburger menu for a file, you have the option to save the file, as well as the option to close it, rename it, duplicate it, and move it out of a project folder if it's in one. Saving the file saves it to the Affinity Photo folder on your iPad, not in iCloud, although you can designate it to save in iCloud if you wish. You tap a project to open it again, and then once you're done editing, you find the export options in the document menu. And as you can see, you can export to 12 different file types with fully custom sizing options, file naming options, resampling options, bit depth, color space, and more. It's honestly incredible, and it puts all of the other apps to shame as far as exporting capabilities. Once you've determined the format, size, and options, you can save your export to files or share it any which way you want via the share sheet. Though not nearly as robust as Affinity, Pixelmator Photo has a nice set of export options. When you go to export an image from Pixelmator, you have 3 choices. The first 2 options are part of the workaround I mentioned while discussing the way Pixelmator copies the RAW files into the .photo file. Option 1 is to modify the original in Photos, and this option is only available if you imported the RAW file from the camera roll. As a workaround for the duplication issue, this is a mediocre solution because of the way Pixelmator designed its file handling. The possible workflow would look like this. Import a photo from the camera roll, which creates a .photo file that lives in limbo in Pixelmator's recent section. Make your edits, write the edits to the raw file in the camera roll, and then delete the in limbo .photo file. The key behind the idea of writing the edits to the raw file in the camera roll is that you can revert them at any time via the Photos app, which Pixelmator actually notes right in the export dialog. But the problem comes if you ever want to tweak the edits made to that file. When you reopen a RAW that you wrote changes to with Pixelmator, it opens like a fresh RAW file with no edits. So if you want to ever be able to go back and tweak a RAW edit, you either have to keep the .photo file, which means duplication, or keep a record of your edits, reset the photo in the camera roll, reopen it into Pixelmator, reapply your edits, and then make any adjustments you might want to make to those edits. This is so unintuitive, and I have no idea what the developers were thinking when they did this. And this isn't an Apple or an iOS limitation, because both RAW Power and Darkroom allow you to write your edits to the RAW in the camera roll and reopen the RAW at any time with all of your edits intact and reset or edit those edits. Pixelmator's second option is a variation on this, which is to save a copy to the camera roll with your edits embedded. This option is available regardless of where you imported the file from. If you use this option, the copy you save to the camera roll is subject to all of the same problems that I just covered, in addition to being another copy, which is a third duplication. If you use this save a copy option, you'll have your original RAW file in whatever location it started in, the .photo file in Pixelmator, and the copy you save to the camera roll. The third export option is the one I'm actually excited about, because when you choose to export your image, you are greeted with this wonderful set of options, which starts with choosing the file type you'd like to use. And you can choose Apple's high efficiency image format, JPEG, PNG, TIFF, and Pixelmator's .photo format if you want yet another duplicate. Where appropriate, you can choose a compression rate, but unfortunately you can't choose a resolution. Once you've got your options set, you can save to files or share any way you like via the share sheet. Snapseed's options are very limited. On export, you're presented with a similar set of options as given in Pixelmator, with the ability to save your RAW edits to the file. And in a win for Snapseed, if you do write your edits to the RAW in the camera roll, you can reopen the file and all of the edits are intact and easy to tweak. You can also create a new copy of the RAW file with the edits written to it. You can export a JPEG copy, export via the share sheet, or open it into another app. But in exporting, using the share sheet or opening in another app, you have no file type, compression, resolution, or any other export options. The RAW edits are applied, a JPEG is generated, and you just choose where the file goes, and that's it. Now, unlike Snapseed and Lightroom, RAW Power has a robust set of export options. Not nearly as many file types as Affinity or even Pixelmator, but the important options are there, and it's excellent to see another app offering a bit depth option. I like that RAW Power also offers the ability to change the export resolution with a number of presets and a fully custom option. And RAW Power, like Affinity, also offers the option to set your export color space. And finally, we have Darkroom, which has a middle ground in terms of export options. When you enter the export settings, you can choose from 3 different JPEG compression levels, 3 different HEIF compression levels, and then TIFF and PNG for uncompressed files, which again isn't as robust as Affinity, but it does hit the most important options. It also allows for creating some metadata on export, which is a very nice option, matched only by Lightroom. Unfortunately, you can't specify image resolution on export, and like Pixelmator, Snapseed, and Darkroom, you have the option to embed the RAW edits in the original RAW file, create a copy with the RAW edits, or export it via the share sheet to files or any other app you choose. Now, there's no winner here because the whole point of these videos has been to help you understand the capabilities of these apps and how they function for editing and managing your files on your iPad. For me, the best option is Lightroom, and in order of preference, just looking at the features and ignoring the editing performance, it would be Lightroom followed by Affinity Photo, RAW Power, then Darkroom, Pixelmator Photo, and finally, if I had no other choice, Snapseed. An important note here is that I use Lightroom and Affinity Photo together. Lightroom is my RAW editor of choice and my asset manager, and then I use Affinity Photo for all of my retouching and other raster editing work, as well as all of my export needs. Whatever choice you make, there's likely to be something missing and some kind of compromise that you have to make, but that's the nature of the world we live in. As much as we'd like it, there is no perfect app or solution. There just isn't. But the great thing is, the iPad and the apps available to us are constantly evolving. Now, I hope you found this video helpful in determining which RAW editor will work best for you and your workflow. And if you have any questions about any of these apps or editing or managing photos on your iPad, please let me know in the comments. And I have a question for you. If you had to pick just one of these 6 apps to work with, which one would you choose? I'll put my answer in the comments as well. And if you think my answer is Lightroom, you're wrong. Now do me a favor and like this video, subscribe to my channel, hit that bell icon so you don't miss any of my videos, and then get out there and take some damn photos. You could use the Files app interface to move... Come on, people, with your cars, like seriously? Is that really necessary?